Welcome, colleagues. Thank you very much for taking the time to join the EQPE Common Stream seminar on research and artificial intelligence. And today I would like to welcome both our speakers. And our first speaker is Marike Kluyts, and our second speaker is Mr. Neil Kramm. I'll firstly introduce Marike, and then she'll do her presentation. And then I shall introduce Neil, and he'll do his presentation. And then there will be sufficient time for questions. I trust that meets with your approval. So Marike is a postgraduate writing specialist in the Teaching and Learning Unit of the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management at the University of Witwatersrand. And Marike is going to share some thoughts with us today on generative AI and research, and with a specific focus on working with students. It's over to you, Marike. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lynette. I'm going to turn my camera off in a bit. I just want to say hi so that everybody sees it's not some AI speaking to you, but a person. So hi, everyone, and welcome, and thank you, Lynette, for the introduction and for inviting me to be part of this discussion. I will turn my camera off and I'll start sharing. Go. Okay, so am I sharing? There we go. Sorry, we don't use Zoom at work, so sometimes I get a little bit confused. So welcome, everyone. My name is Marike, and I'm from Wits. I work, as Lynette mentioned, in the Teaching and Learning Unit of the Commerce, Law and Management faculty at Wits. So what I am planning to do today, and I'm going to do it in about 30 minutes, is to just talk about these things that are on the screen at this point. So talk about student concerns regarding AI, and then kind of the institutional context at Wits that we have, and how we are addressing the use of AI in research with postgrads. And then I'll also kind of just touch on other ways to look at generative AI in postgraduate research, because of course there are many ways and many things to think about. And then I'll end off with a few readings that I think might be useful to you. So my first question is what I've just posted in the chat. I'll put it in here as well. So I want you to just think about how students have talked to you. What concerns have postgraduate students raised with you regarding generative AI use in research? If you can just think about that and then share that in the chat. Okay, so Lynette has indicated how to reference. Thanks for that, Lynette. Anything else? Neil said, should I be using AI for my data analysis? Very good question. Janine says whether they are allowed to use it or not. Also a good question. Okay, so and Ingrid says concerns regarding Gen AI scores on things like Turnitin when they use Grammarly to help grammar rather than using it to write their thesis. That's a good concern. What are implications for AI and ethics? Which one should I use? Yeah, that's a good question. Pia indicated that students asked, students are most concerned about being accused of being dishonest. Jean, good to see you again, Jean. They want to know if Gen AI can find them up-to-date legal sources for South African context. And they also want to know how they can assess if they are reliable. I think, Jean, with the law, and you will know better than I do, it's always a bit of a tricky one because, especially in the South African context, we have very specific databases, and I don't think many of the AI models draw on those databases. So that might be, but these are all good questions, and I'm not going to try and answer them all. I just want to check that, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure about that. Okay, so these are all valid concerns, and oops, that wasn't the button I wanted to press yet. And there are many things that have come up. So at a recent postgraduate networking day we had in our faculty, these were some of the questions that students shared with us. So the more general concerns are in dark green. So how far is too far, and how do I balance the output from AI and my own work? We also had questions about literature review, which is light green. How can it be used to search for sources, and which AI tool is permissible and not permissible to use in the writing process, and which will help with sourcing and organizing of information. Then we also had questions of disclosure, that students were worried about how they should disclose, and that was in light blue. When is it appropriate to use? What are the ethics surrounding transcriptions? If I use it as a paraphrasing and sentence tool, is it necessary to disclose, and to what extent is that permissible? So this is aligned with the comment about Grammarly and how that creates kind of AI kind of polished texts, not an AI written text. And then to what extent and how to disclose AI in our research. Then the last color on the screen is for ethics and integrity, and that's the orange. So what are the most effective AI tools for academic research, and how can I integrate them into my work in such a way that I do not compromise the integrity of my research? And the last one at the bottom of the screen, I am terrified of using it unethically, yet I hear so much about it that I fear I'm missing out. Thus, I think it is crucial that I learn to use it to my advantage whilst maintaining the highest ethical and academic standards. So I think it's very important for us to also grapple with these issues from the perspective of our students in many teaching and learning spaces. And it's good to also have that, is how can we talk about how can we make sure that our students are actually doing the work. And then things like Turnitin's AI detector and various other tools might come into the conversation. However, those types of things research has shown is not incredibly reliable in actually identifying texts as AI generated or not. It has a lot of false positives. So I don't have I think Tracy Braytag's work touches on that quite often, but an article that I have in the reading list for today, or for you to go and engage with afterwards, is a more general article by Eaton, Sarah Lane Eaton, and she also talks about that in there. So there's a good starting point. So to such an extent, Wits has actually, as an institution, turned off the AI detector in Turnitin because it is unreliable, because it flags work that has been created or has been written by a person as being written by AI. And all of these things, of course, just makes it more and more difficult to work with students and to work with anything relating to AI. And there's all of these new developments all of the time. One that came about a while ago, a few weeks ago, maybe that's old news in AI, generative AI terms, but is the feature of deep research that is functionality in ChatGPT and Google Gemini and various other things as well. So with that, we of course don't have institutional policies. Wits doesn't have one. As far as I'm aware, most universities do not have an AI policy. But what we do have at Wits is we have various other documents that we can draw on. And through kind of synthesizing out of these documents certain things is at the moment how we at the teaching and learning unit level in our faculty. And also, I just want to make clear that what I'm talking about, I'm really just talking about within the context of the faculty at Wits and of the teaching and learning unit at Wits, because we don't have an institutional policy. So we're drawing on various documents that are at institutional level, but also at faculty level. So when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about it in a very, very specific context that cannot even be generalized to another faculty at Wits. Okay, so of course the first four documents we have are documents that everyone at Wits has access to. So it's our research integrity policy, our research integrity procedures, the student academic misconduct policy, and the framework for academic integrity. Then at faculty level, we have two documents, well, actually six, but I'm just going to talk about two. We have the CLM guidelines for outsourcing, and then the CLM generative AI guidelines. Those are 5 guides. The pictures are on the right-hand side of the screen. They're not source documents, so you are welcome to them. And then to also just acknowledge, we didn't think all of these beautiful things up ourselves. We drew on the open source guides that UCT created as well. So that might also be a nice stop for you to go have a look at. We try to update these documents as often as possible. This last iteration was updated at the end of last year, so this is 2024, and it is due to be looked at again in the very near future. So I'm going to just talk about 2 documents and how we use this then to kind of grapple with the questions that students have. And of course, because you don't have the context of our documents, I just wanted to pull out a few things for us to have a discussion about so that it makes sense. So this CLM guidelines on outsourcing actually has a longer name. It's the CLM guidelines on outsourcing for statistical and work, but we just truncated to CLM guidelines on outsourcing. And this document talks about the core work of research cannot be outsourced. It must be completed by the researcher. So that's kind of the important part of it. And none of these documents mention AI specifically, but the principles of the documents are applicable to whether you have a human or a non-human actor. So the act of outsourcing, if I am getting somebody else to write up my thesis and paying for it, then it's contract cheating, which is not acceptable. If I'm getting ChatGPT to write my thesis for me, that's also outsourcing. I'm maybe not paying for it. Maybe I'm just paying for a license, but I'm not paying for it, but it's still not my work. So that's kind of the starting point for us when we work with students, as to say, okay, so the thinking work needs to remain your own. And then the 3 other things on the slide as well is very important. We see the advancement of scholarship is associated with the development of thought and adding knowledge through discovery. As a result, Wits's policies and frameworks emphasize the principles of integrity and honesty. that draws on the International Centre of Academic Integrity's definition or principles or pillars of what it means to have academic integrity, which is honesty, trustworthiness, being respectful, responsible, and courageous. And then, of course, the Wits research integrity policy is also forefronts the need for intellectual honesty and research responsibility, and the protection of research participants and their data. And just as an interesting as an addendum to the Wits research integrity policy is the Singapore statement that was, I think, developed in 2020, the World Conference of Research Integrity in Singapore. That's what's called the Singapore Statement, and Wits is a signee of that document. And then fast forward 2 years, because that conference takes place every 2 years. In 2022, it was hosted in Cape Town, so there was a Cape Town statement on research integrity as well. Last year, 2024, it was hosted in Athens, and then next year, 2026, it will be hosted in Vancouver. And these are good spaces to be in touch with when it comes to integrity and AI as well. Okay, so our policy, the faculty guidelines for outsourcing, the main message, if that's the only thing that we distill from it to students, is don't use AI to do things for your research that humans are not allowed to help you with either. So the document is very specific about what type of help you can get. It mentions that nobody can do your data analysis for you. You can't outsource your stats, and you can't outsource your mathematical modeling or whatever it is that you need to do. You need to do it yourself. So it doesn't mean that, of course, you can't ask for help, but you can get somebody to teach you how to do the data analysis, and you could get some, and that's fine. But you can't get somebody to do the data for you, because that's kind of why are you doing a degree? It's to learn specific skills, and you have to learn it through doing. So that's one of the core tenets for us. And it also goes into writing as well. You can't get somebody to write for you. So yes, we know contract cheating, paying somebody to write for you or getting AI to write for you, that's kind of the same thing, and that is problematic. But the document actually in this case goes a little bit further to say that it is completely okay to use things or to get somebody to proofread your work. And then, as in the example, the Grammarly example that was in the chat earlier on as well, that's perfectly fine, according to the guidelines that we have. So when you get somebody or something to help you with surface level areas like spelling, punctuation, and grammar issues, that's fine. But our document, of course, also draws a line that you can't get somebody to edit your work for you, because editing addresses issues in the core content of the text, changing the structure of the text, and therefore also the structure of the thought and the argument of the text. So the best practices that we tell students is that you have to remain the brain of the project. And then you have to find the balance in using AI in the research process. So using it for efficiency and assistance, using it as a sounding board, and then, of course, remembering the limits. So we go in a little bit more detail into when we look at the researcher guidelines for the ethical use of generative AI tools. It's a mouthful. So you'll see on the document that it says draft, and I don't think that word will ever disappear from these documents, because we need to keep on changing them as AI changes. So what we talk to students about is what are some of the acceptable uses, but also that they also always need to first engage with their supervisors and the rules of each of the schools in the faculty. Because it's still an uncertain space, as some supervisors feel more inclined to the use thereof, while others do not. So it remains within that supervisory relationship. Then outside of that, this is what we suggest. So we think it's an acceptable tool for proofing or language editing. So this one's a little bit careful for reviewing citations, yes, but not for rewriting the text. Now, as with many things, AI is neither good or it really depends on the use thereof, whether it's used well or not. And when we're talking about it in an editing phase, almost think about it as a learning tool. Always, we also tell the students always to position it as a learning tool, to not just feed something into AI and say, fix this or improve this. Rather to, when you create your prompt, to say, I have written this piece and give me some suggestions on how I can improve it. Because then you're positioning your AI like you would a writing consultant, which is an acceptable use within an academic space. To say, you go to the writing center with a piece of text and say, I don't know whether this makes sense. Can you help me work through the argument? So the writing consultant will never take the piece of text and rewrite it, but they will ask questions and engage with the person so that they get to the place where they need to get. And if you can set up your AI to do that, that is very useful, as long as it doesn't write for you. And that moves into the drafting consultant and then also technical help. So what we see as non-acceptable uses is authoring and co-authoring. So any process where you outsource the thinking and the reasoning and the originality. Plagiarism, of course, is an issue, and then the reliance on data analysis. So outsourcing generative AI tools to interpret results and draw conclusions. Yeah, so those are the things that we do speak towards. And then we also, I'm not going to go in detail through this table, but to just also say that, and I'm happy to share this, of course, afterwards. So this draws on an article by Martin Becker. He wrote this article last year. Martin Becker is an academic in the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment at Wits. And he incorporated we incorporated his guidelines into our guide. And it's based on his article, Large Language Models and Academic Writing, 5 Tiers of Engagement. So it talks you through the types of tiers that is possible. Now, this is just what we do very specifically, not at Wits in general, but in our faculty, and very much the message that we move out from the teaching and learning unit to the rest of the schools and faculty. But there are, of course, other approaches that are also very useful and something to consider and think about. So I really like Sarah Elaine Eaton's work. So I would just recommend that you follow her work if you are into academic integrity research, integrity and plagiarism, or issues of plagiarism. And this comes from her book, the 2021 book, Plagiarism Higher Education, Tackling Tough Topics in Academic Integrity. The screenshot I took out of the 2025 article that came out a week or so ago, and therefore it's open for you to access. The book, of course, you'll have to buy, unfortunately, but the article, the 2025 article, would be a useful place to start. And she talks about kind of a post-plagiarism approach to writing, where she acknowledges firstly that writing, she calls it hybrid human AI writing, that it will become a normal thing, that we will write with technology and it will become an accepted thing, just like using internet sources and so forth has become, or using the internet for research has become an acceptable thing to do, which was not always the case. Then her second tenet is that AI can be used as a tool to boost creativity. And this can be in the arts, but it can also be linked to ways to solve problems, so creative problem solving, which of course is an important aspect of postgraduate teaching and postgraduate work. She acknowledges that AI can address language barriers and can level the playing field for English second language speakers and English foreign language speakers, which in the South African context, of course, is the majority of our students, and so about only 10% of our population, according to census data, is first language English speakers. So the fourth comment that she has aligns with what we have in our CLM guidelines. And I'm going to read to you what Sarah wrote about this tenant in her 2025 paper. So she says, we can outsource or offload our work to AI, but we do not outsource responsibility. In other words, humans remain accountable for the work that we produce. This includes students who submit work for assessment. As educators, we assume that when we grade an assignment, we are assessing a student's learning. If the work has been outsourced, either to another human through contracting or to an AI, we are assessing an artifact that does not represent a person's learning journey. Okay, and then the fifth tenet is attribution as a way to link ideas together and acknowledge the thread of thought through various studies and works, and that will remain important. And then the sixth tenet, she calls for us to rethink what plagiarism is. And this is maybe something to think about a little bit more deeply rather than me just running through this at 100 miles a minute. She says, quote, that concepts of plagiarism have always been culturally and contextually bound, unquote. So what are the cultural and contextual boundaries for us in the African context broadly, and then also within our universities and in our faculties and divisions and departments and schools, etc. What are the cultural and contextual bounds? And I think we really need to think very closely about what that is. Then another framework that could be used is the ethical framework for responsible generative AI use in research. So ethical stands for what you see there on the screen. I'm not going to read through this entire thing. There's a link at the bottom, but I'll also share the resources, of course. This is also a 2025, it's a 2024 paper. And this is a graphic that they created based on the research they conducted. So for them, it's important to examine policies and guidelines, to think about the social impact of the work of the generative AI tool and how it kind of fits into each space. We need to harness our understanding of the technology. I think that's something maybe that we're not always great at. I'll just talk about myself or mention myself. When the deep research function came out, I felt like an ostrich, and I just wanted to kind of put my head in the sand and kind of forget that this exists, because it was a frightening thought and a sobering experience for me. And I'll quickly show you why. Indicate use, critically engage with outputs and the secure versions, which is very important, and look at user agreements. So I acknowledge that WITS is an incredibly well-resourced institution. So when we talk about access secure versions of AI, there are quite a few that our institution does have access to. So we have an institutional license for Scopus AI. We have institutional licenses for Science Direct, which also has an AMA built into it at this point. We have Copilot as well. So we encourage students, rather than to use ChatGPT, to use Copilot, because that is protected by the agreement, the WITS agreement. And then also Google Gemini, if you log in with your staff account or student account through Google, Google Gemini is also protected by the WITS policies. So their students have access to secure versions of the AI, which I acknowledge is not always the case. And that is, so they are the readings that I would suggest as something to engage with. Becca is the one we drew on for RCLN guidelines. And then the other ones as well are quite useful to have a look at. Then I just want to take this out away. Then I just want to show you something. So this is the one that frightened me the other day. So this is deep research. So I asked Google Gemini, write me a report on academic literacy in the South African context at third year level. I want it in this format. It did a lot of analyzing and thinking, and then out for me, which wasn't too bad. It wasn't referenced because I didn't ask it to reference it. So I asked it, can you please go back and add references? And it did. And on first sight, it doesn't look too bad. The right side people are in here, Leah Street, Bowie, Dagan Baderman, the CHE is in here, Lilith, Scott, Texan, Cipia, they're all here, McKenna's in here as well. So it does a very good job at writing something you don't want it to be able to write. And then it scrapes lots of data you off the internet. And this is the one, like I said, that I wanted to put my head in the sand because it's to have something like that out there. Yeah, so that's it. But then the last question, if there's something like that out there, how do we change our policies? Because these things will keep on keeping on and jumping out at us. And I think the best way to address it is not necessarily with a policy in the sense of this is what you can do with AI, this is what you can't do with AI, because it keeps on changing. Middle last year, AI couldn't write a research article. Now it can. I don't know whether it's a very good research article, but it can write it. And so I think it is really about developing the principles of what we think is good research and what we want us people to take away from that. And if we can enforce the principles of what good research is in our spaces for postgrads, then it doesn't matter whether human actors change or AI actors evolve, the principle remains important. And it is something that we can talk in a little bit more clarity about than just to say, don't use this AI, but use that one. But that's just my thought. And with that, I'm handing back over to you, Lynette. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marike, for a very interesting presentation. We'll take questions later. We'll move over now to Neil, Mr. Neil Kramm. He's an education technology specialist at the Center for Higher Education Research, Teaching and Learning at Rhodes University. Neil, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette. I will also just switch on my camera briefly, just to show that I'm a real person. And now it's working. Sorry, new computer. Okay, I'll quickly share my slides. And I mean, I'm going to build on where Marike has left off on some of the ideas. And but I like asking questions because I hate my own voice. So in the chat, you'll see a link to something. If you could just click that and start answering one very simple question. I mean, we've had such a great presentation now, but what is the one question that you might still have around, you know, AI tools, around, you know, anything about AI and research? Do you have any unanswered questions so far? And what we'll do is we'll actually try and answer those questions and make sure you walk away with some form of an answer. I'm also going to share some good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah, I think we're in an interesting time. Sorry, give me 1 second. My machine doesn't want to share. I tested it just before. Oh, goodness. Okay, I'm going to, guys, I'm really sorry. I might have to restart Zoom. It just updated before I came in here. I'll be back in 30 seconds, but please answer the question so long, if that is fine. Sorry, now I'm back. That is a little bit embarrassing. I think I may have also inadvertently sent the wrong link to WooClap. I don't know if anybody else could get into WooClap. If you can't, just let me know, but I'm going to send it right now. I did.
No, resend, Neil. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I accidentally hit yes to share and it just went into shutdown mode. So that's not gonna help. So yeah. Okay, 1 second. Come on. All right. Now let's try again. All right, that's the one that should work. All right, I'm gonna give you just a couple of seconds. You should be able to like something. So if you can get in, just hit a like or something. And yeah, while you're busy there, I'm just gonna find my slides again and try and share my screen. Who knew a new computer can crash your whole life? All right, awesome. I'm also just going to share a link to the slide deck that I'm going to use because sharing is caring. It's working wonderful. Thank you, Shiloh. If you want to have access to the slide deck, you can you can just click on the bit.ly, and that will take you to the slide deck as well. Ooh, nice big questions. Okay, I'm going to let those questions roll for now, but I'm just going to, as I said, share this slide deck with you. And just to note, there's a driving principle behind any talk like this that I try and do at the moment. And I've tried to find the one quote that would always share it, because I don't want to be a doom prophet, but I do think we're sitting at a point in time where things are going to change. And I think when we think about our own research and our students' research, this is some of a principle that I try and approach when I talk about AI with, clinging to the past won't prepare our students for their future. Students, when they leave the university, are going into spaces where AI is going to be ubiquitous. I've reached out to a lot of colleagues that I worked with that's gone into different spaces, and AI is changing the way that they do research in their fields. And it's not a threat to how we did research. It's just a challenge on how we teach it at the moment. So, and how we engage with research at the moment. So yeah, I mean, I know that's not a very encouraging one to take off with, but I think I'm a realist. So I try and say things where we are. Okay, what's the balance between AI language editing and writing through? Also nice complex questions. So we're touching on the ethical, how do we acknowledge oral examinations? Hey, the Viva. I think there was a talk about the Viva, if I'm correct, Shiloh. How will we teach a bot when the bot? Yeah, no. Good questions. Okay. While I'm going to leave you there to ponder your questions, let me break the future to you even further. So this came out when I think it's over the weekend sometime. Things shift really quickly. Now, again, looking at the future is a fool's game, but there's so much talk about this. We're all very much focused on generative artificial intelligence, when I think we should be thinking about where is this technology going. It's, as Marike said, deep research is something brand new. Well, relatively new in what we can access now. But the next, iteration of where this technology is going to is artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Now, just to make sense for anybody who's not really into computers, all right, at the moment we are looking at generated artificial intelligence as humans still in the loop. It's going to assist us to do something because we can correct any problems and biases. For the moment, AGI comes in, it takes humans out of the loop and it puts us back to this end where it's an automated intelligence, where it should theoretically fix its own errors and not need us to give it direction. I'm going to share this link because it's not part of my slide deck, because I do use the slide deck with mostly student work as well. So I'm not going to break their hearts with that yet. But yeah, just have a look at that. I mean, sure, it is something of a, DeepMind has written this, DeepMind, which is an AI itself. But it does highlight some interesting things to think about. Okay, I'm just going to quickly have a look at the questions. How will will AI develop its own form of critical thinking? I think hopefully the AGI question has answered that question. Notebook LLM, we'll talk about that now. Will AI acquire legal personality in the future? Whoa, that's a deep one. If you notice students used, can you act against the student? So I'm getting some questions around ethical use. I'm getting some questions around some tools, and okay, let's maybe start with what we have in front of us, and then we'll go as we go along. If you have any other questions, just pop them in the chat, or even just pop them in the chat, and we'll take it from there. I'm going to, on the Woo clap, just flip it to the next question. And that's just for me to see what's the experience of everybody in the room. And if you have used any tools, so that I don't duplicate or replicate. I'm going to also say I am quite an advanced user of generative artificial intelligence. I've been working with it since ChatGPT has come out, and I probably use it every single day. I do use it in my research. I used to use all of the tools that's on here. I only use one at the moment, so I actually don't use the rest in any meaningful way. And if there's time, I can show you why. Obviously, I do use Grammarly because English is the second language. Okay, before we get into the sticky things, Marike has talked to us about what our students think. And this is, as I say, a slide deck that I tend to use with students. But I do think these are questions that we as supervisors, all right, as supervisors and as researchers in our own right, really need to ask ourselves, And I say these are the big questions. Number one, do we think AI is reliable? For me, reliable is a very sticky word, because reliable can be truthful, reliable can be, is it logical? There's a whole bunch of different ways to interpret that. But it is nevertheless a question that we need to ask ourselves. And I mean, I see from the use, there is quite a bit of use. So yeah, even Adobe, wow, somebody using Firefly or something like that. But in any case, we have to ask something around, what is our perception of its reliability? Because if we think it's reliable, it's got implications on how we use it. I mean, to be fairly honest, and what the research shows is that it is reliable up to an extent, but the cause for hallucinations are still definitely there, even though it's a lot less than what it was 2 years ago. So there's actually a measure for this that they do mathematically, and that's probably been cut in half in the past 2 years. I mean, that's a feat in itself, but it's not enough for us to really see that when we just look at it. The next question is, does AI understand our context? And I think this is an important question. We all know that all of these models are built in mostly America. There's one or two out of China that we might be dealing with, DeepSeek and those type of guys. But that has implications for the software itself. And why? Because biases are built into it, not because, well, this is what it is, or not because we want to build it biasly, but the worldview of those who built these softwares tend to be replicated in the software itself. So it's always going to be North, it's always going to be, it's always going to be West, it's going to be mostly American. And like the rest of America, somebody asked an environmental question, it's going to burn natural resources quicker than what anybody could make it. All right. But regardless of that, I mean, I think there is this myth that, AI cannot understand the South African context. And, when we work in very specific places, that this would safeguard us from its use and, limit the real impact. I don't think that is necessarily the case. And I'll show you some reasons why the moment we shift to some of the tools. So we have to think about that. But even when I say it, you could get it to understand there's always going to be limits. It's always going to need that human interaction. Does AI understand your discipline? I mean, I assume we've got people here from different fields of commerce, economics, accounting, IS, and so on. And I do think some of our disciplines, if it's hierarchical knowledge, is what Bernstein would say, 1 + 1 + 1 is 2, and there's rule books, there's a high likelihood that you could get it to understand some of what you're doing, especially when it comes to processes. But does it understand your discipline? Probably not. Is AI a better writer than you? In my case, definitely. It's not something I enjoy, but it is something we have to do. So it is another question that we have to ask. And I think it's a question we have to ask very much in relation to our students. And I do think at some point we're creating a downfall. Well, we're creating our own next problem. Because if we look at a lot of the guides around how do we use AI across institutions, say, well, yes, you can use it as something that will help you write. And I mean, I'm all for it. The only problem is if you are, unfortunately, in one of the institutions that do subscribe to any of these AI detectors, for example, using Grammarly would light up an AI detector like a Christmas tree. So I could write everything myself, and I could use Grammarly to do my edits, and it would just go off and say, well, this is all AI generated. So these are the things that we have to consider. And even when you use something like ChatGPT or whatever, the point is there's going to be ramifications of this. And even if you're in an institution that doesn't subscribe to this, I'm dealing with a case, for instance, at the moment where a student's work was submitted to an examiner. The examiner put it through something like a Turnitin and said, well, this is all fraudulent work. It's all AI generated. I refuse to mark this, and I'm going to tell everybody else that they shouldn't be marking the student's work. I mean, that's a whole new level of complexity that we need to think about. Then the last question is, do you think it can reliably do data analysis? And I think that's a difficult question, because on some things it can, on some things it cannot. It might, be good at doing certain forms of analysis. I mean, Atlas TI, for instance, has sentiment analysis that uses the machine learning algorithm that's probably 20 years old, and it does that quite effectively, whereas others might struggle. So these are just some of the big questions that I think we need to always consider. There are obviously limits, in terms of accuracy and reliability. Again, these are sticky words. There's, there could be, the over-reliance could foster, a lack of critical thinking and originality, or the development of evaluative judgment, especially for the student. There could become some form of lack of domain-specific knowledge. But again, these are instances of over-reliance. Now, the big question is rather, do we as supervisors have these conversations with our students? And if we do, what do those conversations look like? Okay. Sorry, I'm going to skip some of these because I'm going to try and answer some of the questions. I'm just going to have a look at, at least let you see what are some of the tools that everybody's been using. Microsoft Designer. Oh, I've heard of that. I've never played with it. Gemini, Copilot. Oh, if you have Copilot, I think you're lucky because it looks really cool. I'm not sure if it is. So yeah, let me just flip this to the next question. This is a very easy question. Do you think AI creates reliable information? Seeing no's. We'll come back to this in a second. Excuse me. Okay, so as you can see, what's on my slide at the moment is my advice to students is to understand how supervisors, to understand the supervisor's perspective on AI. And I'm going to say, if we as supervisors do not, I call it play, but if we do not work with these AIs in disciplinary ways, I think we're doing ourselves a justice, but also our students. And I'm going to show you some of the reasons why in a very brief second. Let's quickly look at, let's first just go back to everybody saying no now. Yes, there's one yes. I'm not sure. You need to check everything. An LM is not an expert. It makes up references, sources when it does not know the answer. Okay. That I'm going to say is partially true nowadays. It depends. Well, let's quickly show why I say it's partially true. And I think it might also answer some of the questions we've had before. Now, I use a paid version of ChatGPT. I've been paying for it for just under 2 years, and I haven't regretted any expense. It's my own money. I'm not playing with house money, but I do think it's a very useful tool. As you can see, I use it quite often. I think this list goes on forever. But one of the big questions is, do we think it produces real or reliable information? I think the question is more, what do you use? Because there's that mantra that says you get what you pay for. So if you're using something for free, you're probably going to get free results. Whereas if you use a paid version, it does not do that. So for instance, in the ChatGPT, the paid version, I've got the option to ask a question and then use the web search. But I mean, in anything we want to ask, what is the main challenge for commerce research since the advent of AI? Or wait, let's be specific, ChatGPT. Okay, so what this is now doing is, and at the moment it's not even searching the internet. It's just doing a basic one. But this is what I do if I want to find out about anything. I mean, if we go down some of the chats, most of them start this way. The moment I know nothing about something, this is how I go. But if I now want to build something that's quite useful around this, let's say I want to build a bot for research, well, for supervisors, okay? And I agree with all of these, which is some of them, I mean, authorship and contribution. I think Marike spoke a bit about that. Okay, we're going to build a bot that we'll share quickly. All right. Create a prompt for building a GPT for supervisors who ask question about research. The, sorry, I can spell, I just can't type. Now, what we're going to do now is prompt building for geo. So this is going to be my prompt. Did it continue now? I think it did. Sorry, guys, I see my internet was dipping a bit. I don't know if you can still see my screen.
Yes, we can, Neil, but
You can.
you
I'm
were
going to wrap
missing
up
for a
now.
while.
Okay, sorry. What I was saying is I'm going to build a GPT now, and it actually got stuck. That's why I said I think I know that's when I dropped off. I'm going to build a GPT for a supervisor, and what we're going to do now, and this is also how I use this in my own research. Commerce. And what makes a paid version useful is you can enable web search, Canvas if you're inclined that way. It can create that. You can also specialize into coding itself, and even add in different actions. Now, what I can do now is I can create this. I'm sharing this with everyone. Sorry, and I'm conscious of time as well. I want to show you just one more thing. So I've actually put in the chat a link to this chatbot. Now, anything you want to ask around supervision and the influence of AI in commerce, this is a very basic bot that would give you some of those some information on that. But we can now even shape this further. So Sarah Eaton's work on academic integrity and especially her book on writing is very useful. So we can actually shape that and build a bot around that. For example, I have built a bot around a particular theorist. So anytime I ask a question, what is morphology? Morphogenesis, not morphology. I'm still in a science mind. But it's going to explain this to me. But what I've done with this specific AI is not to. So that's supposed to be the word that it does use, but it just shows you how it's going to keep some of the things that we put into it. But this specific bot, if we go and edit it, you'll see I have my bot built. This only uses this. and I've uploaded a document with all the information. Now, with this specific bot, I can ask really good questions. I've even built my own supervisor bot as well. So I have a supervisor bot that I can engage with exactly the same way. I call it writing editor. So when I do writing, I actually submit that, upload that piece of writing, and then I can get feedback as if I'm busy working with my own supervisor. But this is also where context matters. So if you're working in a very specialized field, i.e. law or whatever the case might be, if I'm looking at specifically something around a process, I can load the particular documents into this knowledge field, and anything it answers, it would do that based on this knowledge field solely. So yeah, but as part of your research process, and I'm just going to wrap this up because I want to give enough time for questions and answers. I mean, some of you have already highlighted some of the amazing tools that's out there, but there's a lot of stuff for searching for particular literature. And please go onto the slides. There's just so much that it's going to take me a whole day to go through all of them. But I'm just going to highlight some of the very useful ones to you. Elicit.org is a really fantastic tool. It's totally worth the investment. They also give a very good discount to students and academics. That's really worthwhile. Come on. That's really worthwhile. It's really great at finding literature, but you can also upload literature into this. So if you have 3 journals full journals, you can actually upload it here and it can extract data from a PDF, and so on. So again, it's really useful. Let's ask it a simple question of AI in commerce research in South Africa. So what it does now, it has that same logic as what Marike was talking about with the deep research, where it would actually try and refine that question. So if I hover, it would give me the different options that I'm looking for. So, so let's say I want that one. It's going to say, great question, and I say, go. Now, the more you want, the more it will essentially cost. But yeah, you can then just select the fast 50 papers, generate, and what it's now going to do is it's going to search some of the literature that it has available. It's going to write a little report on the top 10 papers, and that's going to be based on citations and so on. But yeah, all of these things also have limits. Number one, it's definitely not connected to all the databases, but it's still worthwhile giving it a go. Site is also fantastic. You can check your references, but you can also find references. The same with consensus. You can look for specific ones or add to different ones. As I said, they have limits in terms of being the biggest database that they're connected to is Semantic Scholar. And that's limited in terms of the different databases, especially things like law, that most of the books are really behind a paywall. I think somebody mentioned Research Rabbit. This is a fantastic tool as well. Litmaps Litmaps is really useful. You plant a seed. So if I put in, or I submitted this paper, the Developing Evaluative Judgment, it will show you this is the seed paper and how it's connected to other parts of research. And the bigger the node, the more citations, the more important the paper is. So you can actually visually see, hey, I need to read Hattie to 2007. But it could be that Hattie is just one of those references that everybody must reference for it to be seen. Here's Research Rabbit doing its thing. And again, just have a look through some of these. You can listen to papers as well. There's one that's called, it's my new latest favorite thing. It's called 11 Reader. I'll put a link to it in the Play Store, just in the chat. But maybe I should hand back. But before I do, I just want to show you the one thing that scares me the most. This is called thesis.ai. So thesis.ai, it goes the other way around. So it relies on you knowing and being able to, or being well versed enough in the literature to say, these are the up to top 50 papers in my field or on my topic. You drag and drop, and then it writes a entire chapter for you. And I'll be putting that in the chat as well. And Lynette, let me hand back to you because I see I've run out of time.
Thank you very much, Neil, and much appreciated. Shall we open for questions? Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of the speakers? Or clarify something? Any comments from anyone? I don't see any raised hands. Oh, there is one. Or is there? No, there isn't. Okay, Esther, thank you very much for your comment, Esther. Are there any of the other tools that you'd like Neil to illustrate in the meanwhile? Okay, thank you, Marie, for that. Thank you very much. I'm just trying to find Neil, could you speak to Grammarly again? There's a question from Clarissa. Neil, would you mind? Thank you. Just comment about Grammarly. Clarissa, which aspect of Grammarly would you like to learn more about?
Oh, sure. Can you hear me? I hope you can.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lynette. Thank you, Neil. I think I just wanted to find out more, Neil, about, because you mentioned that, of course, Grammarly is something that lights up in terms of the different AI detectors. But of course, like you said, for most of our researchers, especially those where English is a second language, they might ask Grammarly, or they might rely on Grammarly just to check grammar and text. And I'm just wondering, in terms of, do you have suggestions for more, I suppose, more appropriate examples or more refined tools that could help them? I know that I saw in the slides you mentioned Elicit, but I wonder in terms of just those language assistance tools, if you have any suggestions. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So in terms of language editing, even if you look at the most simple and basic language editor, they are all little machine learning bots, essentially, right? The problem with a lot of these AI detectors stem from the method that they use to and I'm putting this in inverted commas, identify text, because essentially it comes down to how AI generates versus how we identify. So generates on probabilities. So if I ask it, write me a story about a cat in a hat, it's going to start, one day there was a cat. Now, every one of those words goes on a random probability from the first word. So it randomizes between 30 and 95%. What is the most likely word to be next when it generates. Now, when it does the checking, it does exactly the same, but now it says, well, what's the probability that this could match a probable, pattern?
I
So,
see.
so within that is where that problem lies. Now, all of them, I mean, literally all of the language bots nowadays are powered by some form of LLM or some form of language model. So I don't think there's going to be a way around it. I tried the one that I heard great things about, called Triska. And I think it's a lot better than Grammarly. It's a little bit more expensive, because Rhodes, we actually do support Grammarly for our students, undergrads and postgrads. But even that gets picked up by these AI detectors, and there's only one or two of them that would actually be honest about it and say, well, we're all going to pick them up, and that copy leaks, is quite plain and says, no matter what, it's going to pop up. So I don't think there is going to be a better alternative, unfortunately.
Thank you, Neil. That actually explains
Yeah.
it really well. I'm just thinking, I see there that someone posted in terms of how do institutions, what do we use and what do we rely on? That's interesting for us to note. Yeah, just to be cautious. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the empirical research, not the sales research, because when they want to sell you something, they're going to tell you it will wash your car and do everything for you. But independent research pitches these models, their reliability is as low as 20%. My own testing is also quite low. I mean, from when they released it, it took me about 4.5 minutes to beat it from its release. And I mean, what we're doing is we're catching, and I'm putting in inverted commas, we're catching inappropriate use of these things at particular levels, but I don't know if we're actually doing what we intended to do, because for me to hide it, I can hide it in 3 minutes and nobody would know. Awesome.
Thank you
Good
very much,
question.
Neil. Neil, we have another question. And the question is from Ruka Abdullah. What has been your experience with using AI to set authentic type assessments? Rukaya, are you referring to undergrads? Can you hear me, Neil?
Yes, sorry, I can. No, I was waiting to see if Ruka is going to answer.
No.
But yeah. So even when we talk about authentic assessment, we've had this in other honors modules where authentic assessment has been tried as a way to and I'm going to say beat AI. I think if you want to do that to beat AI, I think that you might have you might be using a lot of energy on something that you might not be able to do. But if you want to use authentic assessment because it's going to support what you want to get your students to go to, then sure. I mean, one example that I was involved with, we gave the students a specific prompt that they would have to submit or put into whatever model they wanted to, or they felt comfortable with. And it would create a data set for them to analyze. And that was really interesting because if the lecturer had to create the data set, it would take, weeks to build that. But doing it with AI was actually quite simple. So yeah, so that was useful. I hope that answers your question, Ruka. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Neil. Marike, you've asked a question. Have we tried Corey, COREI, and other apps?
Yes. So
Thank you.
just quickly, I'll share my screen just for a second. Again. So this is Corey or Corey. I don't know how to say it.
No.
What it does is, so it's based on this article also by navigating the ethical frontier, graduate students' experiences with generative AI mediated scholarship. They built this model, which is Corey, kind of acronym names app. So Leo, that does literature exploration. Nora does navigational optics for research activities and so forth. And yeah, so it's something just to go. I have played a little with it. It is not great in the South African context, of course, because it was built by Canadian researchers. But there are maybe just something interesting, because what it does, at least what Leo does, if you put something in it, well, it can't find anything. So I put in South African environmental law, it found nothing. But then it actually gives you input on what are the thinking steps as a student that you need to go think about, even though it can't find anything. These are the steps that you need to think about as a researcher. And I think that's quite useful, because I don't think we want to lose students being able to do the thing. Yes, it's nice to streamline a process, but we don't want them to not be able to do the data analysis in the end. They should still be able to do it. So just to find that balance, I think, is important. And again, because it was built by researchers and because it was built by academic integrity researchers, I think this is something to just go play around with a little bit to see what it is and what you can do with it, maybe with your students.
Thank you very, very much, Marike. Thank you so much. I see some people are excusing themselves. That's fine. Thank you for joining us. We understand that. Any other questions that you'd like to ask? If not, I think this brings us to the end of our session. Thank you very much, Marike and Neil, for stimulating us to think more about the role of AI. And Neil, I used the bot that you just created for supervisors, and I asked it to highlight the main points from Sarah Eaton's 2021 work, which it did. And then it even created questions for research supervision and assessment criteria for me based on those, on her main points. So supervisors, I think we can use the bot that Neil started generating, and we can actually do something with it. So thank you so much. And yeah, Marike, you told us, do not use AI to do things for your research that humans are not allowed to help you with either. We take your point. And thank you very much for the time both of you have taken to prepare the presentations. It was really very interesting. I'm sure that if we want to have another session or if colleagues want to learn more about the tools we can always arrange something else. We'll wait for feedback from the colleagues. So thank you very much to our speakers, to all the colleagues for joining. We really appreciate this. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you. And if you
Thank
have
you.
ideas